Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Thomas, and I discuss my near-death experience, the things I learned, and the things I think you should know. So before we begin, I would just like to say thank you to my subscribers and regular followers. I was at a doctor appointment today and thinking about my mortality, and it made me realize how grateful I am for my YouTube viewers. I know I'm repeating myself, but you really are a big reason why I came back from my near-death experience, to share what I was shown and what I'd seen. So for your part in helping me to fulfill my soul's mission, thank you. Today's YouTube is one that I think a lot of people are curious about, and one that still others need to hear for reassurance. So I will be reading from my notes because I don't want to forget anything. So if my dialogue sounds scripted, that's why. And if I'm looking away, that's why. So I have my tea, I have my notes, so let's begin. So I was trying to think of a subject matter for today's YouTube, and it wasn't readily coming to me. So I did what I usually do, and I prayed to Sarah, my guardian angel, for inspiration. And she almost immediately came back with the response that I should discuss death and what it was like to die. It's a new topic for me, though I've touched on it briefly before in other videos. I would like to point out before we get to the heart of the subject that while I didn't die, I had the choice to come back or to not. And at the point my near death at that point my near death experience was just an experience. I hadn't been told that I'd had a near death experience, and I made the angels that showed up for me promise that I could come back in order for me to go with them. So what led to my near death experience was an adrenal crisis. Plainly put, this is where your adrenal glands stop producing the adrenaline and cortisol that is needed to deal with physical or psychological stress. And the first thing that happens is your organs, starting with your brain, begin to shut down. My prefrontal cortex, where your manners are, was shutting down, and I was not myself. I was out of my mind. My girlfriend had brought me to the emergency department where I worked, and because of how I was behaving, I ended up restrained to a gurney in the psych room. And I was supposed to be wearing a medic alert for the adrenal insufficiency, but I wasn't, and so I was left alone. I remember trying to call out for help, and I hadn't been able to tell or otherwise convey to my coworkers that I was having an adrenal crisis. So they left me alone in the psych room, and I was desperately trying to hang on as I felt my life energy, my strength leaving me. I knew I was dying, but because my brain was shutting down, I couldn't tell anyone that. I was calling out for help, but they were leaving me alone. And at some point, I ran out of strength to call out or even to lift my head. And I remember trying to think of a prayer and that I needed to find some peace, but I couldn't even pray, and it was becoming more difficult to even think in a linear fashion. It was about then that this black mud-like material started filling my vision from the periphery. I was clinging to a small point of light in the middle of my vision when three angels showed up, riding into existence from a pinpoint of rainbow light to my right. They came riding into the room on a chariot, riding clouds around from my right side to the foot of my gurney, getting bigger and bigger until they were life-size at my feet. It was then that they convinced me to come with them, and it did take a lot of convincing because I didn't want to die. And that's when I left my body. The process of getting to the point where I left my body didn't hurt, but being so fatigued, so drained of my vitality, did not feel good. It was like going to sleep, and then it was like my angels flipped a switch and I was out of my body hovering over the earth. It was like going to sleep and suddenly waking up in a reality that was more real than real. I was suddenly out of my body, though I retained a sense of self and was aware of several things going on at once. I was aware of what was going on in the emergency department, and at the same time, I was seeing my mother driving on the freeway, coming to where I was at a few hours away. And all the while, I was suddenly in outer space looking down at the earth with my angels by my side. Though I was incredibly scared, I knew what was going on because I recognized the beings that showed up as angels. I guess just because of the chariot and the clouds and being a Christian. Sarah, the only angel that communicated with me, made sure I felt safe and secure and explained everything that was happening to me so that I would be comfortable with the process. That said, I wouldn't let Sarah leave my side except when she had to while I met with Jesus in heaven. There were times like when I witnessed Jesus's crucifixion, or when I was in this black void being shown the mathematics and physics that govern the universe, when she wasn't there, but I understood she was somewhere waiting for me. While it was scary, I also felt a profound peace like I'd never felt before or since. With the peace was also an incredible sense of calm, but also I felt euphoric. As I relived the best years of my life, I felt an intense euphoria that I hadn't felt since I was a teenager, but it was even more intense. This is because the emotions you experience on the other side are so much more intense than you feel here. I'm not sure why that is, except to say that the other side is so much more real than real, and that is where real life takes place. Later in my near death experience, I came to know God's love, and it was an incredible feeling that stayed with me even after my near death experience. I had the knowledge of the entire cosmos just a thought away. Anything I wanted to know was just a matter of thinking about, and any curiosity would be answered. There was nothing new under the sun. Anything that had ever been known or would ever be known was mine to know. Before my near-death experience, death was something that occupied my mind often, as I had to face my mortality on several occasions over the last couple decades, dealing with a stem cell disease, acute leukemia, serious infections, and rejecting my bone marrow stem cell transplant. I was afraid that this was all that there was, and I hadn't been able to live a full life. My near-death experience really changed all that and how I view life. I was shown that we are infinite, immortal beings that never really die. One question I am left with is, are we ever really born? I was shown a sort of hybrid system between Christianity and reincarnation. I was told by Jesus when I met with him in private, while in heaven, that I had reached the point where I could go on to another life, another existence on another planet. I could stay in heaven, or I could come back here. But but not all souls get that chance, or that choice rather. Some people have to come back here, and Earth acts like a sort of spiritual classroom, but we all end up in the same place eventually. Death for me was a definite wake-up call to get busy living. I was ashamed that I didn't have a gift to give to God when I was in heaven. I was told that no one really has a gift to give to God, but that any gift you would have for him or her would be to use the gifts that God gave to you. That was another big reason why I wanted to come back, because I felt like I hadn't used the incredible gifts I'd been given here on Earth. Death should always be a reminder to get busy living because mortal life is precious. I really can't put into words what it was like to pass on to the other side, but I want to reassure you that it doesn't hurt and that we are infinite immortal beings. The pathophysiology that brings you to death may be painful, but with today's modern medicine, Doctors can control pain very effectively. With my experience being more real than real, I have to ask myself what this reality is, because I know the other side is where real life takes place. My theory is that true life is not a physical life, and that physical life is something like a dream. I would also like to assure you that your guardian angels will show up just before or as you die, like they did with me. It is not something you will have to navigate alone. Your angels will show up to guide you and keep you safe on your journey. If you've lost a loved one, I would like to assure you that they either came back here in another body, went on to some other existence, or went to heaven. I would like you to know how powerful God's love is and what an incredible feeling it is to feel His love. I assure you that we are infinite and don't really die, and that you will see your loved one again. Sarah wanted you to know that God forgets no one, and Christ will meet each individual after his or her life. She wants you to know that death is just a doorway, one that you've walked through many times before. Know that your loved ones, even loved ones that you haven't met before, await you on the other side. You should know that God won't let anything befall you that wouldn't befall the next man or woman. By that, Sarah means that there is a finite amount of suffering one can experience, and that if no man experiences it, or if one man experiences it, so can you. So in summation, I would like to say that death isn't the end. In fact, we are infinite beings that never really die. For me, heaven seemed more like a resting place than somewhere one would spend an eternity, but heaven is inside each of us. Death is not something to lament, rather it is something to get excited about. As long as we do what we know is right and use the gifts God gives us, we have nothing to fear. So thank you for watching, for the likes, and for subscribing. I wish you much peace and love. Namaste.